Take a look at the module overview slide real quick. So we've got 7 sections to cover in this one. This is probably our longest video today as far as quantity of PowerPoint slides. So that's why I'm going to move fairly quickly through this. And also to be aware that what we're trying to accomplish here is just kind of a crash course, everything you could possibly need to know going from Windows 7 to Windows 8 as far as, how do you install Windows 8, how do you do images with Windows 8, how do you upgrade, how do you do the activation, how do you do the user settings. So we're trying to cover everything in one video. Okay, so let's get into the first section then, preparing to install and deploy Windows 8.1. This is the preparation section, so let's get in the first slide with content here. So some planning considerations, be aware of the 3 editions of 8.1. You've got Windows 8.1 Retail or just regular, then you've got 8.1 Pro, and you've got 8.1 Enterprise. And we'll see on the next slide the kind of differentiating factors between the different editions. Also be aware Windows 8.1 still comes in 32-bit as well as 64-bit. They don't like to mix and match very much. So, for example, if you were coming from like a Windows 7 32-bit, you can't upgrade that to Windows 8.1 64-bit. So you can't really mix and match the 32-bit and 64-bit. And then there's also Windows RT. You probably heard of that. You probably heard of the Microsoft Surface tablet or Surface 2 tablet. That's going to be running Windows RT, which is a scaled-down version that does allow you to run Windows Store apps, but not desktop apps. Mm-hmm. And then there's the Surface Pro or Surface 2 Pro, where you do get the ability to run regular desktop apps. But be aware of the acronym Windows RT. That's on the exam for sure. And be aware that that's just think of the Surface tablet where you can run all the Windows Store apps. Let's go to the next slide, and this is where we're seeing what are the differences then between 8.1 regular, Pro, and Enterprise, and RT. And I'll point out just a couple things here. So there are some certification questions which might say, like, hey, you want to be able to join a Windows 8.1 computer to a domain. Well, if that's the case, then look at the 4th row there, domain join. You'd have to have Pro. Pro or Enterprise would do it for you. So that's the kind of test question you can get. Oh, hey, you want to have, you want to use App Locker. Well, down near the bottom there's App Locker. You can see, oh gosh, you have to have Windows 8.1 Enterprise, and that's the only version that works. So be aware of this grid. I'd say, maybe even memorize this grid.
I would memorize it.
Be aware.
You can guarantee the Hyper-V question being on there for sure.
Absolutely,
so,
yeah. And then Hyper-V, be aware you have to have the 64-bit CPU. You cannot have a 64-bit version of Windows 8.1
Which
as
is
well.
either Pro or Enterprise.
Yeah. Now, also, I want to point out that there's Workplace Join in here. Workplace Join, we mentioned briefly. That's where you can join a tablet, smartphone, that kind of a mobile device, a personal device, and you can join that to have management capability over that computer. But notice the additions here, even a retail edition of 8.1, you can take that and Workplace join it. And that goes along with the whole consumerization of IT concept where people bring in their personal devices. Maybe they went to the local store and bought their personal device running Surface or some tablet, and it's got the retail version.
Yeah, best way to think is we generally think of them as laptops, right? Well, we're talking about these ones that come apart now, convertible types, and then tablets, and the OEMs are making any number of form factors using the Windows 8.1 retail version. So this is a great, if you have the little 8-inch or 7-inch one, you can bring that in. You can actually join it. So that's really a benefit without having to go with Pro or Enterprise, which are let's face it, they are more expensive. So it's a good feature to have.
Yeah. One more thing to point out here is remote desktops. So take a look at that. You'll see, I just want to clarify what's going on here. If you see the client only, what that means is that you've got the remote desktop client and you can connect to another computer with remote desktop. And then for the Pro and Enterprise, notice you've got a full check mark there. That means that you can remote desktop into that computer that has Pro or Enterprise. So that could be a possible certification question. Hey, you've got a computer at work, you want to use remote desktop to get into it. What edition do you have to be running? It's got to be running Pro or Enterprise. Okay, let's keep going. We've got a lot of slides to cover here. So next up here, again, planning considerations for deploying 8.1. You got to think about, okay, do you have Active Directory? Notice it says ADDS. So for those of you coming from older operating systems and whatnot, we used to call it Active Directory, and that got renamed in, I think, Server 2008. That got renamed to Active Directory Domain Services. So you'll see the acronym ADDS quite a bit, and that's just good old Active Directory with users and computers and group policies and things of that nature. So you got to consider, do you have that? Do you have a management infrastructure? Do you have a deployment infrastructure already implemented? Do you have image servers? Do you have imaging software? You need to consider, how do you want to maintain user settings if you're going to move them from an old computer to a new computer? How are those settings migrating around? You may want to have a customized image. We've got a section on that coming up. And real-world planning considerations for deploying 8.1 are going to be, like it says at the very bottom here, possibly a lengthy project, possibly a multi-year project, depending upon how large your enterprise is. Okay, next up is hardware requirements. Now, these are all fertile test question areas here. You could, any one of these could be a certification question. So, but we'll call it a reference. I don't think we need to go over the numbers in particular.
No.
But even, for example, the fourth bullet point, you need to have a DirectX 9 device that supports WDDM 1.0 or higher. That could be a test question. So,
I definitely think that TPM question is virtual smart cards and full bit. Like that will
absolutely. Be on there. So the bottom half of the screen is saying, well, for certain features of Windows 8.1, you'll need to have certain pieces of hardware. So what Brad just mentioned is the TPM Trusted Platform Module. That's used for full BitLocker support, but new feature in 8.1, we'll talk about later, is called Virtual Smart Cards. So if you want to use Virtual Smart Cards, then you got to have the TPM on the motherboard. Absolutely. Okay, and next up for real world, moving from a previous version of Windows to Windows 8.1, you might have some application compatibility issues. So the bottom half of the slide talks about your mitigation methods, all the possible ways you can deal with that situation. I like the second to last one, where it's just something simple like an application compatibility feature. That's where you can just right-click the executable and go to Properties, and you can see the Compatibility tab. Next section then, installing Windows 8.1. So you've already done your preparation and planning. So next up is here, how are you going to install it? You can do a clean install, kind of where you're wiping away anything that's there and starting from scratch. You can do an upgrade from a previous version. You can also do a migration. Migration is simply a clean install, but you're also migrating settings and files from an older machine to the new machine. So let's keep going. So for a clean installation, what are your options? You can boot to the DVD, you can boot to a USB flash drive, you can also boot to the network if you have an image server out there. Microsoft's image server is called WDS, Windows Deployment Services. So that would you'd have to have an image up there that the user could download. Bottom half here, you could apply an image through a USB flash drive that's using, you'd boot to Windows PE and use DISM. You can apply an image manually that way if you don't want to use an image server. And then, Brad, you also mentioned these acronyms here, MDT, SCCM. So Microsoft Deployment Toolkit can help you apply images, and System Center Configuration Manager can also help you deploy images. Let's keep going. A lot to cover. So next here is upgrading to 8.1. Now, this slide gives you the screenshot of what it looks like when you upgrade. And notice, do take a look at this screenshot. It says choose what to keep. And then the first radio button there, it might be a little tough to see here. It says keep Windows settings, personal files, and apps. The second radio button says keep personal files only, which means you're not keeping apps or settings. So you've got options there, and be aware of your default options with the different previous operating systems. Let's go to the next slide, you'll see what I mean. We've got different upgrade paths depending upon your previous operating system. So let's start at the bottom, actually. If you have Windows 7 or Windows 8 or Windows 8.1, you can upgrade that pretty easily to Windows 8.1. Let's go back, though. If you have Windows XP or Vista, you cannot upgrade those directly. Your best bet there is to do a clean install and then migrate some of the older settings from the older operating system there, whether it's user files, user data, what have you. And at the very bottom here, they're just saying, hey, with the server or XP Service Pack 2, you can't even do a migration of settings. It's only a clean installation. And then also, I'll just add to the slide, if you have a 32-bit version, you're trying to go to a 64-bit version, that's not going to upgrade, or vice versa. If you had a 64-bit version, you're trying to go to 32-bit, you can't upgrade that.
And just the migration part there, if you could go back a slide on the XP, SP 3, we're talking about the user state migration tool. I think you do a bit talk about that. So when you just see that little box there that says migration, you kind of go, what's that mean? There is a tool that does that very easily and keeps track of how you migrate depending on who your users are.
Absolutely. Okay. So this might be a little easier to see, what are your upgrade paths. Notice lower left-hand corner, you'll see Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 8.1, and you'll see the large check marks there for it. Basically keeps everything. So you can upgrade everything from 7 or 8 to 8.1. And then when you start going backwards, you'll go to Vista, and notice Vista does not have a check mark in that column. You cannot upgrade Vista straight to 8.1. Now you can do some migrations, like Brad just mentioned. You can migrate some of the information, but you're still going to end up with a clean install with a migration. And then Windows XP Service Pack 3 is the oldest operating system. You can still keep some information with these migration tools. They're dropping XP support at some point, aren't they? April?
Oh, yeah.
Or I think we're almost upon
the... Yeah, we're there. We're just a few weeks away.
Okay. And at the very bottom of this screen, you'll see it says cross-architecture, and that means x32, x64, 32-bit, 64-bit. Not supported. Okay, next up here is the concept of having your operating system inside a VHD file. And this does not have to necessarily be a virtual machine VHD file. You can have a VHD file in disk management, for example. You can create it there, mount it there, and you can mount it to your file system. And then you can apply an operating system to a VHD file, and you can even deploy that VHD file out to all your systems. And Windows computers can boot to that VHD file. Another cool thing you can do with VHD files is you can download a VHD file to your computer and dual boot. So maybe you've got your original operating system and you've got your VHD file. You can set that up to be a dual boot system. So when you boot your computer, you can choose which way you want to go, your original operating system or the operating system inside the VHD file. And the VHD file is just sitting there on your C drive. So it's a very cool feature. I think that came out in Windows 7. It's been around for a little while now. If you haven't used it by now, you'll definitely want to take a look at that. There may be some certification questions about how to set this up. So let me do a quick demo of this. We'll go to disk management. So where is disk management? You can go to the power user menu here, and we can go to disk management. It's right there in the list. That's one way to get there. You could go to computer management. It's in there. I also like to show people you can do a start run, and then if you know your Microsoft console names, you can type those out. So disk mgmt .msc. Those are still around. It's a fast way to get there.
I still do it.
So this is just going to take a second here to load up, and I'll maximize this. And so good old disk management. It's been like this for quite a long time. But new features, you can go up to the action menu and say create a VHD file. So I'll just browse to the file system here. And let's just go to the, I'll go to the all files E drive here, and I'll just call this test VHD.VHD. And we'll just say this is 100 megabytes. We'll keep this small. There's two formats. Beware of the differences between the formats. The big cutoff point here is that a VHD file only supports up to 2 terabytes of disk size. VHDX, let's say you need a 3 terabyte virtual hard disk file. There you go. You got to use VHDX. VHDX, the X also stands for XML, so it's got better resilience to power failure events and whatnot. Anyway, let's make this thing, and then it's going to go ahead and mount this for us already as well. Let's go to the file system just to verify. Where's our E drive? There's our test VHDX files. There it is. And it's mounted just like any disk that is first introduced into disk management. You have to right-click and say Initialize Disk. And it's acting like a regular disk. Like, do you want to use MBR or GPT? So master boot record or good partition table. We don't need to worry about that right now. We'll just say the good old MBR.
Yeah, play it safe.
And then it just says basic disk online. And we can make a new simple volume in here. I'm just going to blaze through this really fast. We'll call this the V drive, just to be funny. You can use any drive letter like any disk you like. I'll call this the VHD. Let's leave that. VHD. And quick format, finish.
It's so
there we go.
That's so quick.
Now in our PC, we have a V drive.
There you go.
And we can open up, look at the files inside. This is something else that's very cool that you can do with VHD files, is you can mount them in disk management and then look at all the files inside. So let's say you do have an operating system inside a VHD file. You can mount that and maybe make some changes, make some edits. So a lot of cool things you can do with VHD files now. So back to this booting from native boot VHD file. Also be aware of the addition. You have to have Pro or Enterprise for this feature.
Definitely.
And then also be aware, lower left-hand corner, you can also do all that stuff we just did through the command line tool disk part. And you should be aware of how to do this through disk part, hint, hint. So make sure you know how to do that. And then like Brad was mentioning in the other video, they show you how to modify your boot configuration database, BCD, in order to create the dual boot. So you need to know how to do that as well. Okay, let's keep going. So next up here is Windows to Go. This is another way to get a device running Windows 8.1. Now in this case, you've got a USB drive that's been certified just for this feature called Windows to Go. And you're going to boot a computer to that USB flash drive, and that USB flash drive is running the operating system. It's running Windows 8.1, and you do not have any access to the physical disks inside the regular computer.
That's right.
So that's a security issue, or a great security feature of Windows to Go. So this is another way to get your users to Windows 8.1. Maybe you've got older hardware that doesn't support Windows 8.1, or maybe you've got some applications that can't upgrade or whatever. You can, hey, just give them a USB flash drive, and they can boot it that way. And they can also take it home and just work from home on their Windows 8.1 system. You can also customize the image so they have all the applications they need for work. You can have this set up now with direct access. So let's say you give them the USB flash drive, they take it home, they boot it up, they now have Windows 8.1, it's connecting through direct access to work, and they can work on their machine as if they're at work.
Yeah, this is really remarkable because there are certified drives from that Microsoft works with the OEMs. One thing that's not mentioned on our slide is that it supports BitLocker with a password. It does not do the TPM. That's one of the few limitations, but these are really nice actually if you have that mobile workforce.
Yeah.
Say you have a call center and you have employees coming at different shifts, maybe 3 shifts within a 24-hour period. They just bring in their USB drive, you make it available to them, they plug it in, they still get to keep their preferences, and it is their machine essentially, but it's the same box, you're plugging it in. It's great. It's also great if you like me and I have 4 kids and you're tired of fixing machines, so you just potentially plug in the USB drive and when something goes wrong, and it does with them, you just plug another one in. So they're really great. They're good for mobility. They're good to keep. You can actually, when you actually provision them, it's very easy to provision. We get this whole another course. We have it out there in NVA, but it's really fun to watch. So I would definitely be looking at this if you're trying to reduce your costs, and you do have a mobile workforce. You have maybe some contingent staff coming in, and you need to reuse the same hardware. This is a great solution. And later we'll be talking about the virtual smart cards. They also have a few of them out there now, where you get the virtual smart card and the USB drive all in one.
Okay, let's keep going. Next thing here is Windows 8.1 image deployments. So we've got several things here. One is your image file type. Has for a long time now been a WIM file. WIM file stands for Windows Image File. That's a file-based disk image. So it's a file, but when you deploy it out to machine, it takes up the whole disk by default. And the other thing we just talked about is VHD files. So you can take a VHD file, have an operating system inside that. That's another type of image file now that you can use. So be aware of the 2 image file types. And then here's our tool parade of all the the deployment tools you need to know about.
Please don't be daunted. These aren't that bad.
So for the exam though, I would say you just need to be aware of a little bit about each one, be aware of the basics of each one. You don't have to get into a whole lot of excruciating detail necessarily. Maybe on one of these, DISM, I would say you have to have some pretty good knowledge, but you just have to know what these things mean, what they are. I think that's kind of the nutshell here. So let's go through these. The first one here is the Windows Assessment and Deployment Kit. That's Windows ADK. The thing to be aware of is that is not a tool. That is a collection of tools. And so underneath that, I have a bunch of smaller bullet points. So here are some of the tools that you might see inside the ADK. This is not a full listing, but the ones we need to be aware of. The first one here is Windows System Image Manager, Windows SIM. You need to associate that with answer files. That's where you make an answer file that answers all the prompts that you get during an installation. So we'll talk more about that in just a second. Windows PE, it's Windows Pre-Execution Environment. That's basically a miniature operating system that you boot your computer to in order to apply a full image to it. You cannot run Windows PE as a regular operating system. It's got limitations, like I think it reboots every 24 hours or 72 hours or something like that. And it's very, very limited.
It's very skinny, very thin.
Yeah. Next up here is USMT, User State Migration Tool. So we mentioned briefly this is a way to migrate settings from one computer to another. Maybe you have an old computer running XP or Vista. You're deploying brand new computers running 8.1, but you want to copy some things over, maybe the user files, their personal files, there may be some settings. You can use the USMT to migrate some of that stuff over. And in the 687 course, we did a demonstration of USMT and how that works. So that's in the ADK. We've also got DISM, Deployment Image Servicing and Management Tool. Let's take a look at that one. That's one you're definitely going to have some questions on. You got to be really familiar with that one. So here's a PowerShell window. And I'm just going to type out DISM, and it's dism.exe. I'm sure you guys are aware with executables, you often don't have to type out the exe. We'll just do /?. See what we got here.
Whoa.
/?. I'll scroll back up here. Okay, so DISM, what are all your options?
A lot.
Here's the name, Deployment Image Servicing and Management Tool. You can service and manage images with DISM. So we've got a bunch of switches, and I'd say you should be aware of what all of these generic imaging commands do. So, for example, you can mount an image from a WIM or VHD file. So you've got an image already. You can mount it. Then you can make changes to it, commit those changes, and then unmount the image. So that's a classic thing you can do with DISM. You can update features and packages and updates in Windows images using the mount, make your changes, commit your changes, and unmount.
And that's really a standard procedure. It's documented to death out there. So if you're looking for that, it's out on TechNet.
Yeah.
It's also It's also part of when you download this, there is actually a file that explains how to do all of that too. So it's not quite that daunting.
Absolutely. Now we've got some other commands here, and a lot of these are going to be pretty self-explanatory once you read them. I'm going to jump down to be aware of these two, /online versus /image. /image, that sounds a little more self-explanatory. That's the you're trying to get to an image. You're trying to work with an image. /online, though, can help you look at how your current operating system has different things going on. So you can do a dism /online and get features lists and updates lists and things of that nature. So be aware what that online switch means. That means your current operating system. Okay, so that, like you said, there's a lot of documentation out there for DISM, and we've got lots of videos out there. So just wanted to crash course you there, make sure you're all aware of what to do. Okay, so back to the PowerPoint slide here. We've got the list of all of our tools. So we just talked about DISM. There are potentially quite a few questions on DISM on the exam, so just be aware of that. Also, ImageX is a tool that's not in this list, but has been around for a long time, and it's still out there, and that could still be on your exam as well. However, DISM is really superseding that now. They have deprecated ImageX. Deprecated means it's still there, but in the next version of Windows, it might be gone. So ImageX can still help you mount an image, edit an image, unmount the image. But DISM can do that now too. So if you have the option, you want to choose DISM these days. But you may still have to, on your certification exam, they may still mention ImageX, and you got to know what that means.
Good call.
So let's keep going, though. So we talked about ACT already. Coming up later is some volume activation discussion about this volume activation tool. I think in 688, did you guys cover the Windows Performance Toolkit?
We did to death.
Okay.
Yes. So.
Okay. Yeah. So that's on the exam.
It's so fun. That was all these pretty little graphs.
Yeah.
Quite a bit.
Now, something else that's to be aware of with imaging is SysPrep. SysPrep has been around for a long time. We'll talk about SysPrep coming up in the next slide. That's basically where you have a source or reference computer where you set up the reference computer just the way you like it, and then you sysprep it by removing all the, they call it generalize. You remove anything that's unique to the system, making it more general, and then you can use that as your image to deploy out to hundreds of machines. So we'll come to that in just a second. So the last two acronyms here, I think you mentioned MDT, and then Windows Deployment Services is your image server if you use Microsoft image servers. Okay, so here we go. Next slide talks about SysPrep. So typically what you do is you want to have a computer customized just the way you like it. Then you make a copy of that, and you want to deploy that copy out. So they call that source computer sometimes the reference computer, reference installation, the source installation. So what do you do here? You customize it. You install the operating system. You install service packs. You install all the updates. You install all the desktop apps and Windows Store apps, and generally just customize this however you want to customize it for your environment. Once you've done all that, you will, quote, generalize that installation with SysPrep. SysPrep's going to remove all the unique information. So it'll remove the computer name, the computer IP address, the computer SID, security ID. Anything that's unique to that computer will be removed. And then at that point, the computer is shut down. And what we want to do is take a copy of that hard drive and put that into an image file. So the way to do that, there's a couple ways. One is you can boot up that computer through using Windows PE, and then use ImageX or DISM to capture the image of that computer. You can also boot that computer to the network if you have WDS, and you can download from WDS automatically what's called a capture boot image that allows you to capture the settings of that reference computer up to the WDS server as an image file. So different ways of capturing that reference computer image. Then at the very bottom, I've got modify the image as needed. That's with DISM. And then finally, you deploy the image. And you can deploy the image very easily through Windows Deployment Services or System Center Configuration Manager, or individually through Windows PE with like a USB flash drive, for example. Okay, we talked about answer files. Answer files help answer all the prompts during an installation. So you can create that through the Windows System Image Manager. Answer files are in XML format, and they've got to be named a certain way there, auto-attend XML, and then that's about it. It's just answer all the prompts. So if you want a fully automated installation, you'd have an answer file to answer a lot of the prompts.
There's some templates out there too, so
yeah,
go ahead and take a look.
DISM we've already kind of talked about. You can capture images, apply images, mount, edit, unmount. Just be aware you can do all these things. So you can, for example, you can enable features inside an image, disable features inside an image, add drivers, add packages. You can even, check this out, you can even upgrade an image to a different edition of Windows inside the image file. We just want to give you a brief overview of what's out there for volume activation to make your life easier. Yes, you have to activate Windows. It confirms your product and product key status. There's a relationship between the product key and an installation on a specific device. I'm sure you guys are aware Microsoft licensing has its peccadillos. So there's three main ways to activate here. We've got the retail is you go to the store, you buy Windows. That's a retail activation. OEM is when you buy a laptop, desktop, tablet from a hardware manufacturer, and they ship it to you. It's already activated. They've already activated it for you. That's OEM activation. And the third one here is let's say you're doing your own deployments internally. Then you want to activate your own systems. That's going to be called volume licensing activation, or volume activation. So how do you find out if you're activated or not, or how to change your activation status? You can go to System in Control Panel. Also in the new Charms bar, it's PC Info, same thing. And we've seen this screenshot before. The very bottom is the activation section. So that's where you can click on the button there to activate Windows or change your product key, things of that nature. There's also, in PC settings, a new way to activate Windows. So there's basically two ways now to activate the System Control Panel applet or in the PC settings. And here's some volume activation technologies you can use. There's three basic ways to go. The older ways, let's start at the bottom here. The bottom one here is Mac, Multiple Activation Key. This is a way to activate multiple computers using Mac. And once you activate a computer with Mac, you don't have to activate it again. So that's the benefit of MAK. Let's go back up to the second one, though. The second one here is KMS, Key Management Service. This can handle a lot more computers, and it's a lot more automated. It's a lot easier to use than Mac. So you'll probably end up using KMS if you have more than, say, 25 computers in your environment. And KMS, you set up a KMS server. The clients find it through DNS. And it's basically like having your own activation server internally instead of going out to Microsoft. But then that activation server will be able to talk to Microsoft. You'll be able to manage all your licenses with that KMS server. And let's go up to the top one here. The new way is called Active Directory-based activation. So that's a newer method for volume activation. You got to have Windows 8 and Server 2012 operating systems or later. So there are basically just a variety of ways for you to activate your systems. And the last slide on this is just what are some of the tools you can use. Well, there's a command line tool you might be aware of already called slmgr.vbs. Let's take a quick look at that. So we'll go to PowerShell. I'll just type out slmgr.vbs. That stands for, I think, Software Licensing Manager. And you can do / and see what your options are. And let's look at some of these options. So what do we got here? You can do /IPK, install product key, /ATO, activate Windows, okay, /DLI, display license information. Let's try that one. And you'll notice, wait a second, there's a lot more to this than meets the eye. There's 5 screens of switches. I'll show you that again. Let's do a DLI, display license information, and we can see that this has Enterprise Edition, and you can see our partial product keys listed, license statuses. We're not currently licensed. I think this is a brand new virtual machine we set up with an eval edition or something like that. It hasn't been activated yet. Well, how do we know? We can go out to PC settings and PC info, and we can see at the bottom of the system applet here, Windows is not activated. So I don't know, it's probably not a big deal here with our eval systems, but
we're okay.
I don't want to embarrass you, Brad. Microsoft here. I don't know if that's bad or not. We're not activated, but it's just an eval system. Okay, so let's go back out to the /? And just to show you, there's a lot more to this than meets the eye. Software Licensing Management Tool. So DLI is a pretty simple one, display license information. Yep. Now here's a fun one that a lot of people know about and like is /rearm.
I knew you were going to say that.
So if you have an eval system and the eval period is up, and gosh darn it, they want you to activate, you can say, no, I want to rearm this for another 30 days.
Yeah, that's right.
But they only let you do that a certain number of times.
Yeah, you get a couple of those.
You get a couple of those. Then they make you get activated.
No, actually, all those command switches that Zach just shown, they are documented. I mean, it's kind of fun. This in the interface, you actually get a GUI, but they are actually listed in TechNet. So when you install the tool, or you actually don't install the tools there, but you can go out to TechNet and look it up, and they have nice ways of showing which one of the switches and the parameters do, and why you'd want to use them. And there's some pretty good guidance out there. So if it kind of looks like, oh my goodness, don't worry about it. Go out and look it up. There's some. If you want to do something, they'll show you which command line to use. Just pick and choose from the menu, and then you can use it.
Yeah.
After a while, you'll get sick like Zach and really start memorizing these things. So, but don't worry, that's coming. There is hope.
Okay, so slmgr.vbs, I'd say probably know the DLI switch, display license information, and probably the rearm. And then beyond that, you're right, there's so many, like you don't really have to memorize all those switches.
There's other ways to do them too.
Yeah. So. Next up here is the Volume Activation Management Tool, VAMT. We've got a screenshot on the next slide on that one, so we'll just show you the screenshot. But this is where you can work with Mac and KMS activation to do volume activation. And then the bottom one here is the new method, the Active Directory-based activation. You can install the Volume Activation Services server role on Server 2012 to get this new one. Let's go to the next slide. You can see a screenshot here of the Volume Activation Management Tool, VAMT, VAMPT. And so it might be a little tough to see here, but upper left-hand corner, you'll see products. You can have your Office product keys and your Windows product keys. You'll see that Active Directory-based activations available. You can also get some reports. This is great. Volume licensing reports. It can give you reports on if any of your client machines are at risk or not activated. You can get reports on all that stuff. So migrating to Windows just means you've got an old computer. You're migrating settings and files to a new computer. We've got two tools that can do that. You've got Windows Easy Transfer as a GUI tool, and you've got USMT, User State Migration. That's the IT Pro command line-based tool for large bulk migrations. We had a demo of that in the 687 course, so we'll just keep going. So there's a slide on Windows Easy Transfer. There's another slide here on USMT. USMT, by the way, basically scan state on the old computer, load state on the new computer, and you can use XML files to totally customize the process. Scan state, load state. Next up is user profiles. User profiles have not changed significantly since previous versions of Windows. Just be aware, user profiles are now in the C:\users folder. So sometimes every couple of versions of Windows, they seem to change the location. So profiles are still there. They're in the users folder now. They still contain all your files and folders and registry settings. You can still do local profiles versus roaming profiles. That's where the user settings follow them around. You've got the roaming profiles stored on a central server. You can still do mandatory profiles where they're not allowed to make changes to their profile. And you can also manage profiles through group policies. We've got folder redirection. Now the magic there is that the roaming profile would normally download entirely to the client system, but with folder redirection, you keep the profile up on the file server and only download what the user asks for. So that significantly reduces bandwidth. So a lot of people love that feature with folder redirection. But you can combine that with offline files. So if they do download some files, they're cached locally. So in case they lose their network access, they still have access to some of those files. So that's folder redirection. And I think we had a demo on that in 687. And one new feature, though, in Windows 8 to be aware of is this new feature for profiles called the primary computer setting. This allows you to say to which computers or devices you want to allow the user to have the roaming profile. So this is something that you set up in Active Directory. It's called the MSDS-primary computer attribute. And you set that up in a user's attribute list in the user account. And then you specify which computers will have the roaming profile. Okay, and I think maybe our last section here is UEV, User Experience Virtualization. So an overview of this. This is a new thing that has come with, look at the last bullet here. It comes with the Microsoft Desktop Optimization Pack. So MDOP has a lot of things inside it. It's got UEV, it's got AppV, it's got DART, Disaster and Recovery Tools Kit, and MBAM, Microsoft BitLocker Administration Management.
Yep, definitely.
All the tools in MDOP are fair game for the Windows 8 exams. So be aware of that, especially on the 688 exam. If you decide to divide and conquer, they're all on the 688 exam. But if you take 689, then of course that's going to be in there as well. So everything that's in MDOP, you got to know at least some of the basics of what these things do and how they work. So UEV is one of many things that are in the Microsoft Desktop Optimization Pack. So UEV is going to synchronize operating system settings and desktop application settings from one computer to another. It's not a roaming profile. It's not their personal files. It's just their settings for their desktop, for their operating system and for their desktop apps. But one of the magic features of this is if you're using VDI. So if you have virtual desktop infrastructure and you want the user settings to follow them from their local physical desktop or laptop to their virtual desktop, only UEV can do that. Only UEV can migrate those settings from one place to another so their experience follows them around from one location to another. So let's keep going here. Settings are synchronized when applications are closed out. This only works with Windows 7 and later. This is a great PowerPoint slide here, nice grid here, comparing what's the difference between roaming profiles and UEV. And actually, one thing that's missing from the slide I forgot to point out. Roaming profiles will roam everything, all your application settings for all your apps. UEV allows you to decide which application settings you would like to migrate from one computer to another. I shouldn't say migrate, but just kind of like a roaming profile, these settings will follow you around from one computer to another.
Right.
So UEV gives you a lot more control over which applications you're saving the settings and having them follow the user around. So to the grid here, we've got roaming profiles in Windows 7 and Windows 8. You'll see that, roaming settings between multiple computers, that's fine. UEV can do that as well. But look at the second row there. Roam settings between physical and virtual applications. That's where UEV is a standout. That's from physical to virtual. You definitely have to use UEV there. And let's kind of scroll down here to the third from bottom, supports primary computer attribute. We just talked about that. That's a new feature with Windows 8. You got to have Windows 8 and Server 2012 to have that primary computer attribute for roaming profiles. Okay, let's keep going. So more on UEV. How does it work? Well, each client system that participates has to have a UEV agent. That's just a piece of software, a client software that runs on every client. You can deploy that software any way that you deploy software in general. It's just that you can deploy it as an MSI file. The UEV agent will keep track of the registry and file system on the client system. Next, you have to decide which applications that you want to keep track of the settings when the user moves around from one device to another. That is defined in something called a settings location template. And you have to have a settings location template for each application that you want to migrate those settings. So be aware of that. Now look at the slide here. In the upper right-hand corner, we see, for example, they have created 4 settings location templates, one for Microsoft Word, one for Excel, one for Outlook, and one for Internet Explorer. So the idea being that if the user goes from a physical machine to a virtual machine or just any other device, these settings can follow them around. Now, lower right-hand corner, you'll see there's something called the settings storage location. This is where their settings are actually stored. So it's kind of like roaming profiles, where you have a central file server where the settings are stored. The only difference now is we're not talking roaming profiles, we're talking about these application settings. So the settings location templates say which applications. The settings storage location on the file server is where the settings actually reside. When the user is moving around from one device to another, they will download the settings from that central location. There's also a term called the settings location catalog. That's not on this slide. The settings location catalog is, think of it like a regular catalog. A catalog is a list. It's a list of all your templates. Mm-hmm. So the settings location catalog is a list of all your settings location templates. Okay, so the next slide here talks about more about the templates. Again, you have to have a template for each application that you want to have synchronized. If you need to make some templates, now some are included, but if you need to make your own, there's something called the UEV generator that can make some templates for you. And what this basically does is just keep track of the registry and file system. It's almost like a snapshot tool where it keeps track of the registry and file system before you install an application, then you install the application, and then it keeps track of what changes were made, what file system locations were modified, and what registry locations were modified. And it's going to put that into your settings location template file. And at the very bottom here, we see that the templates have to be copied to the location catalog. Okay, let's keep going. And this is just deploying the UEV client agent, however you deploy software. So you can do manual, group policy, system center, etc.